Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope you and your family are well and safe. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Cherry, and I'm from the Dubai Future Foundation. I'm part of the Area 2071 team. Welcome to our session for today, which is the Women's Majlis panel discussion on the future of fashion. And this session will be recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel afterwards. So I also wanted to inform everyone that you can submit your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And before we start, I'd like to tell you a bit more about Area 2071. So Area 2071 is an initiative by the Dubai Future Foundation, which is a manifestation of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum's vision to institutionalize the future shaping. And our mission in the Dubai Future Foundation is to collectively imagine, inspire, and design Dubai's future. Our vision is to make Dubai a leading city of the future. And if you are wondering what 2071 means, it represents the 100 years of the UAE since its inception in 1971. And part of its vision is to become one of the world's leading nations by 2071. And it's an ecosystem that brings together great minds, and it's purposely designed to really connect or deeply connect the private sector, the talent, and the government to co-create the future. And how do we do that? We do that through hosting programs. Some of you may know that the Dubai Future Accelerator is our flagship program in the Dubai Future Foundation. And aside from that, we also hosted some of the programs like the Techstars Dubai Accelerators, the Microsoft AI Venture Lab, Smart Dubai Blockchain Challenge, and many more. And we actually have some upcoming exciting programs like the Aviation Traveler Wellbeing Program. So if you would like to know more about that, feel free to visit the website programs.dubaifuture.gov.ae. And aside from the programs, we also aim to create a vibrant community in the ecosystem. So what we do is we host events and activations to really encourage the community to interact, to engage, and grow together. And here are some of the engagement that we had before. And today's session is also one of the great example of that engagement. And just to give you a brief about Women's Majlis, it's launched in March 2019 in line with the celebration of International Women's Day. It is a monthly gathering that brings together inspirational speakers and diverse audience to share individual insights, connect through their stories, inspire and impact everyone. Through a series of talks, one-to-one sessions, panel discussion like this one. And also it's a platform to celebrate diversity and women around the world. And here are our previous speakers for Women's Majlis and the moderators. So if you notice that the moderators are from DFF, the reason behind this is we really want to give the platform to our talent for new learning experience as well as showcase their skills and also make the session more personal. That's why without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague Rhoda Tani, who would be moderating the session for today. And I hope you all enjoy the session.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'd like to introduce the ladies that are going to be part of the panel today. So we'll start with Nadine Kanzel. Nadine is a noted photographer and award-winning hot jewelry designer. She is the founder and the designer of Bilarabi jewelry brand. She was born in Beirut, based in Dubai. Nadine is Modern Arabia's creative ambassador to the world, having worked in various design-related fields along several stints in journalism. Relocating to Dubai prompted her to dedicate her time to photography. Our second panelist, Hiba Al-Habashi. Hiba has 10 years of entrepreneurial and startup experience, and currently she's an angel investor and sits on a number of advisory boards and startups in the MENA region, including Egyptian hydro farms and hydroponic farming concept based in Cairo. Most recently, Hiba was the director of investments at Future Tech Lab, a London-based investment company focused on materials science, biotech, nanotech, and their portfolio companies notably include Pangaya, a sustainable streetwear label, My Cowork, a leather alternatives company, and the Diamond Foundry, and above the ground Diamond Lab. Arwa Al-Banawi. Arwa is a Saudi fashion designer. She owns the brand Arwa Al-Banawi, which is an urban luxury ready-to-wear brand bridging gaps between high-end fashion and streetwear. Like her label, Arwa is an electric mix of contracts blending traditional classical tailoring with contemporary East meets West perspectives to empower the women of today. Now, before we jump into our main discussion, I'd like to give the floor to Nadine, Heba, and Arwa to tell us more about themselves. Let's start with Nadine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadine Kanso. I've been living in the UAE for the last 20 years. I'm married with two big men. And I consider Dubai to be, and the UAE to be home. I've started my brand 14 years ago, and it's called Bil Arabi. I'm also a photographer, as Rauda had mentioned. I love to work in the creative world. I love to collaborate, and it's something I'm passionate about. It's something that I look forward to every morning, and this is where everything starts and goes from there.
Okay, Heba, would you like to tell us more about yourself, Heba?
Hi everyone, my name is Heba. Thank you so much for attending this session and thanks for including me. So I'm originally from Cairo, but I grew up all over the world because my dad was a diplomat. So I ended up going to college in Boston and I studied economics at Harvard. And after graduating, I really wanted to move back to Egypt because I had never really lived there. So I moved back and I started working at Flat Six Labs, which is a startup accelerator. And that was pretty much my first entry into the tech and entrepreneurship space in the Middle East. I loved it so much, so I've been working in that space for my entire career. After being at Flat Six Labs, I joined Uber here in Dubai and I moved to the UAE. And I was one of the first people in the region and launching it and scaling it here. Following that, I joined DP, where I worked in the management team, and I got to learn a lot about sort of entrepreneurial ventures that are in design and in fashion, like Arwa's and Nadine's. Most of them are obviously in D3. My last job, as Rob mentioned, was the investment director at FTL, which is a venture fund that's based in the UK, but focuses on sort of investing in material science, nanotech, biotech, and really anything that involves circularity in the retail space. So we had a robust portfolio of companies. I guess you guys might have heard of Pangaya. It's a streetwear label that uses a lot of recycled and sustainable materials, as well as many other very interesting companies that I guess I'll touch on today in this talk.
Thank you, Heba. Arwa, can you tell us more about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited for this session, inshallah. So my name's Arwa Banawi. I started my brand 5 years ago, Arwa Banawi fashion label. I'm from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I started my studio in Dubai in 2015. Basically, I was one of the first designers that came to Dubai Design District, and it was such an incredible and exciting project that I really felt that's where I want to have my studio based in the region. And now I operate between Saudi and Dubai. I have 2 design studios. The brand is an urban luxury brand. It really celebrates communicating the Arab culture through the brand, and communicating as well the language of the Arab woman. So there's a lot of Arabic calligraphy in my collections. There's a lot of the Arabic language is always instilled in my brand. And alhamdulillah, I've had the privilege to have, I'd say, more than 3 major global collaborations within my brand. And it's always a beautiful story to blend my heritage, blend my story with the story of the brand that is speaking to a more global and Western demographic. And I studied in London College of Fashion in Dubai, and before that I was in finance. I did have a jump in career. And I worked with Brown Book magazine in Dubai for as well, before starting my brand. And I believe really as well, that was an inspiration for me to really have that urge. Okay, I want to start my brand now. I always wanted to be a designer. I just never really knew how to start, when to start. And I believe also working with Brown Book, with the Shabib brothers, bin Shabib, Ahmed al-Rashid, it also gave me that sense, because I worked with them directly and they're entrepreneurs themselves. It gave me that inspiration to start my brand. So alhamdulillah, it's been now 5 years, and inshallah working on new projects as well at the moment.
Inshallah. Can you ladies tell me, how did you discover your love of fashion? What inspired you to get into this industry? Was it by accident? Was it something that you've always wanted to get into? Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was never like it was by accident actually, because I'm a graphic designer and a communication art student. I did radio, TV, and film. And back like 14 years ago, when things went a bit south in terms of like our identity and in terms of the 9/11 issues and how we were being portrayed as Arab, that kind of struck a chord, and it became kind of my mission to promote our language, our identity, and our beauty of our culture. So this is where the brand Bilarabi came from. So it was not planned. It was pretty much very organic. But because I used to be a graphic designer, still is obviously, you never take out the design from someone. So loving the typography and the calligraphy, that translated from my photography into jewelry. And this is 14 years down the road. This is where it's sitting. So probably it's a nice journey, but never been like focused on a business side of things.
That's very interesting. I didn't know what inspired your brand. That's a very interesting story. What about you, Arwa?
So I wanted to get into fashion. I wanted to be a designer, honestly, since I was 8 or 10 years old. It's everything I talk about. I always cut out, photos, magazine papers, and just the pages, keep them in a file and say, inshallah, one day when I start my brand. So I've been doing that since I was a kid. And I really believe how it started is really started from home. My mother is an artist. She's a painter and she does porcelain as well. So every time I walk in on her, she's always in art class at home. And my father loves art history. Every time we travel, he always makes a deal with us that we have to visit one museum, and that was non-negotiable. So of course, being a kid, I used to really dread that. And then, subhanAllah, years after, it's really what your eyes have seen. When you start a brand, when you start any creative journey, you go back to, your eyes is really a memory of its own, everything you saw since you're a kid. So I've basically, being Saudi and traveling to the West a lot, traveling with my parents to Europe, I've had that, I believe that's where the East and West came in the inspiration in my brand, because really it's a merge of both worlds. And that's really how it started. I used to, go to the tailors with my dad when he's tailoring his suits in Italy. I remember all of these things. And I just really got inspired really from, as a kid. It just became an addiction, really. So I knew I wanted to do my brand. I just never knew when. Until, alhamdulillah, 5 years ago is when I decided now it's time to launch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Hiba? I know that you work more on the business side of fashion, more specifically sustainability in fashion. So how did you get into that?
Okay, well, it's actually a little bit different than both of you guys. But I think that fashion sort of led me to tech in a funny way. So basically, I've always been obviously intrigued by fashion from an aesthetics perspective. I guess like most girls. But more than that, I became kind of interested in the way that technology can help democratize fashion and sort of give a platform to younger designers that might not necessarily have like capital for brick and mortar or expensive marketing campaigns. So when I was in college, I really became interested in getting to know a lot of independent designers because I was always looking for non-mainstream things to wear. Obviously, when you're in college, your budget is limited, but you still want to look cool and different. So I was always on the hunt for like independent or younger designers. So when I got to know a lot of them, whether it was in Boston or New York, I understood that one of the biggest things that can help them is tech, because tech is kind of a tool that they can use to get to so many different customers in different parts of the world without really having like a huge investment capital to begin with. So that really led me to sort of my interest in tech and startups and VC and entrepreneurship in 2010. And it sort of led me to explore both fashion tech as well as different sides of tech.
Okay. So moving to our topic for today, which is the future of fashion. As we all know, the fashion industry was one of the industries that were heavily affected by the pandemic. Um, when it comes to spending, because a lot of consumers had to lost their jobs, they couldn't have they couldn't spend as freely as they used to. And then also when it comes to manufacturing, a lot of the factories closed down, a lot of the work basically stopped. And with lockdowns, people were not able to go outside the mall, to the shops, to the boutiques to basically shop and buy fashion products. And also in the past years, sustainability has been one of the core conversation topics in the fashion industry. The question is that we have today, what will the fashion industry look like moving forward? So let's start with, how has the fashion industry changed in the past 5 years?
Maybe should I start?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, cool. So I think let's take like sort of a little bit of a step back. I think there's been so many changes, obviously, over the last 5 years in fashion and retail and sort of consumer habits, let's say. So I think data has become a really integral way that platforms merchandise, buy, and even design in order to fit their customers. With the helps of giants like Shopify, retailers can sort of hone in on valuable insights that can increase conversion rates or improve their customer service and sort of decrease returns. So I think that's been a really big sort of change and plus in terms of data. So there's also been a lot of new business models that have come about, like rentals and consignment, that are actually becoming really mainstream now in sort of more developed markets. For example, Rent the Runway is a unicorn, which means that it's valued over $1 billion. And they, like, I think last year they raised about $125 million in funding. So it's really cool that a clothing rental company can be so large. And it just goes to show you that business models are becoming more innovative. So similar to Rent the Runway, for example, there's another luxury consignment player called The Real Real, which actually IPO'd and went public last year and is currently valued, I think, at 1.7 or $2 billion after having sort of started in 2012. So again, The Real Real, another really good example of a business model that's giving people a chance to own maybe luxury brands at a better price through consignment. In terms of sustainability, which I guess is the main topic of today, I think there's a lot of experimentation being done in new materials by both old school and independent brands. Let's take an example. For example, Stella McCartney and Adidas are both really leading the way in terms of experimentation with new materials. I don't know if you guys remember, but Adidas recently launched a shoe made exclusively from recycled bottles that they have collected from waste in the ocean. And they partnered with this company called Parlay in order to do that. And their shoe was such a big hit that actually Adidas then decided that all of their polyester products are going to be 100% recycled by 2025. So they set that as a goal. Because obviously sportswear and shoes consume a lot of polyester, and polyester at the end of the day is made from plastic. And Stella McCartney, for example, now is only using leather alternatives instead of leathers, natural leathers. So I think that these kinds of changes are very, very significant, and we're going to see them progress even more in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Let's talk about the clothing industry when it comes to the fashion sector. Arwa, how do you feel like the industry has changed since you started your brand versus today?
Definitely from a designer's perspective, and having my own fashion house, where we are at the urban luxury brand positioning, and our demographic is really for customers that want to wear, I would say, pieces that are made in very high quality ateliers, not mass production. So I believe when I started, I remember social media was really at the peak of existing. So there wasn't really Insta shopping. There was no WhatsApp orders, and these took place literally while I was running my brand. So I would say in the past 5 years, consumer behavior in shopping has really changed. And as well as the mass-produced brands, like from the top of my head, brands like Zara, websites like ASOS, you have a lot of options as a consumer, not as you used to before. Before, if you want to get that certain cut and that certain silhouette, you really have to go to that certain designer to get it. So from the top of my head, for example, Balma is a brand that really, that very distinctive shoulder pad silhouette is Balma. Dior is a brand that really celebrates femininity, and that very romantic French woman aesthetic is for that. So really, there was at that time, really, as a consumer, if you want to buy a certain piece, you have to go to that certain brand, because it's the only brand that is really going to give you what you want. And in the past 5 years, there has been an insane, crazy change where there are so many brands, so many brands. Some of them that are brands that are only operating through Insta shopping. And there are so many options. So now consumers are really, you have so many options, and you can get it and get it now. So you don't even have to go to the boutique and get that piece and have that shopping boutique experience. From a click of a button, if you found something similar to what you want, even if it's not the brand that you want, you can just find it on Instagram and send a message or WhatsApp, and in 2 days it's with you. So even if it's not a luxury or urban luxury brand, even if it's a brand that is from, the brands that are mostly mass production. So that has changed a lot in the past 5 years. And consumer behavior changed a lot as well. If you want something, they want it now. They want it now, as in even in 2 hours, with like a delivery if it's within the same, if it's local. So that is definitely a change that took place in the 5 years, and brands have to get on that if you want. And if you don't want to, that's a prerogative that brands should, I feel, whatever you're comfortable with. There are some brands that don't want to be available for whenever you want. They still want to operate through their boutique, through their atelier, to keep the experience very authentic. So that is also a prerogative that if designers want to keep that, I think it's beautiful as well. But we're just definitely highlighting the fact that in the past 5 years, definitely there's extreme speed in a customer wanting something and they want it now. And there's extreme speed in a lot of brands coming up with a lot of options, where consumers don't have to have that, let's say, how do you say, that very علاقة خاصة with a certain brand. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. It doesn't have to be, because there are a lot of other options that could give you that item you want, but very quickly. So that's, I believe, one of the big changes that I have experienced and seen with my eyes as, you know, a brand owner in the last 5 years, that it still keeps growing, because online shopping now, especially during this pandemic, is really growing. That is, if you're not on that already, then that's something that I believe a lot of brands have to think of, and to also deliver to your customer in speed, like really fast, and to always keep them alerted and keep that relationship very strong and close. So that is something that I would say, in my opinion, and definitely in my experience in the last 5 years.
Yeah. What about the jewelry industry, Nadine? How do you feel like it changed in the past 5 years?
I mean, when it comes to jewelry is a slower paced kind of industry. So you don't have to launch 4 collections a year plus cruise plus I don't know what. I mean, you can really stick to very simple collections once a year. Even from that collection, you can always go into subs if you want. If you don't want to launch anything major the next year. So it's a totally different mindset. It's a slower pace, which is, I mean, for me, it's amazing. Then I can really enjoy what I'm doing. And probably I'll be, like Arwa said, I will be from that, the brands that would like to keep that connection with people. We do a lot of customization, but obviously the online business has proven, and the WhatsApp business has proven that we need to be more hands-on. And we've seen that in the pandemic, whereby working, let's say, with the UNAS the last few months, we realized that our sales went much, I mean, higher on the online. And we decided that we needed to give them more pieces, because we had more, if you want, coverage or visibility when it came to online with them. We were selling more with them. Obviously, we're not selling in the stores, since the stores were closed, and a lot of people still are reluctant to go at this point in time back into malls and into trying things on and all of that. So we are a totally different kind of a mindset. I know that a lot of designers don't think the way I think. A lot of designers keep on producing on monthly basis. They would produce I don't know, small things all throughout the year, which is not the case for Bilarabi. So it depends on what you want, who are your clients, and how you want to move forward. But definitely I would want to strengthen my business when it comes to the online experience and the online visibility, if you want. That's something that I mean, I learned that I had to and have to be there and be present.
I think the next question is very relevant to what you just said. How do you think technology is shaping the future of the industry? Like, especially with the pandemic and everything that's going on, a lot of these stores, even stores that didn't sell online before, even brands that didn't have much of an existence on online shops like Unas, Farfetch, were all of a sudden on these platforms. So how do you think technology is shaping the future of this industry?
I mean, if it comes to me, I'll be very brief, and then I'll give it to Hiba, because I'm sure she has more insights on that. For us, it's definitely we need to be online, and I'm sure other businesses will be online. I mean, it's the future. It's definitely the future for everything, but
Yeah.
still, the experience of the one-on-one and all of that is very essential. We do a lot of customization, so that's something we need to keep in mind. But Hiba, please give us your insights.
Yeah, so maybe I'll talk a little bit about technology in terms of new materials, because that's something that most people don't talk a lot about, or maybe don't know a lot about. Like, the first thing that comes to your mind is digital and like e-commerce, which obviously you guys already covered, and it's, you know, it's becoming more and more apparent to the general consumer. But from my perspective, I think that material science and biotech is really starting to converge with conventional design to sort of identify new materials, new coatings, dyeing technologies, fabric treatments, and even new ways to create jewelry. And these things are not just sustainable in terms of the environment, but they're also becoming more financially sustainable. So, for example, a really cool company that was part of our portfolio at FTL is called Vitro Labs. They basically create fur and leather in a lab grown from cells derived from normal animals. So they basically extract these cells and they grow them by giving them nutrients, and then these cells eventually create a leather that is almost identical to an animal leather. It smells the same, it feels the same, but obviously it's an alternative leather, so it's not a real leather. So some brands are already starting to use these leather alternatives, like for example, Gucci. And if you come to think of it, of course, this is better because you're not harming any animals, but actually leather production consumes, I think, something to 83 billion gallons of water a year, which is massive. Leather production is quite detrimental to the environment because you have to use super chemical dyes in tanneries, and then all of these dyes later get dumped in oceans and in rivers, so it's extremely polluted. So obviously, alternative leathers is a great way to use technology to help fashion and help people still remain with the same aesthetics and what they love, which is obviously maybe sometimes animal skins, but you know, in a more responsible way. And eventually, these things like virtual labs is super expensive now because it's just starting off. But eventually, when it starts to scale, the prices are going to become much more competitive than animal hides. Another really interesting example that I love to talk about is Levi's. So Levi's is a super old brand, very like, you know, rooted in sort of like the history of the US. So it's extremely old. And the core line of what Levi's produces is denim, and denim is actually extremely environmentally unfriendly for two reasons. So denim is made from cotton, and cotton cultivation, again, consumes a huge amount of water. And denim is dyed with indigo, and indigo dyeing actually, again, is super harsh chemicals, water pollution, water consuming, so again, super detrimental to the environment. So Levi's realized really early on that in order for them to be able to continue growing and continue being relevant to young customers, they have to adopt technologies that are much better in terms of dyeing. As far as I know, last time I spoke to Levi's when I was at FTL, they were working with two technologies. In case you guys are interested, air dye and color zen. These two technologies actually allow you to do dyeing without water at all. So it's an air dyeing technology where you basically treat virgin cotton with coatings that allow them to be dyed with almost no chemicals and no water, so natural processes. Obviously, these technologies have a long way to go because right now, for example, the strength of the colors may not be as strong, or the color may fade faster, or maybe they don't have as much of a range, but slowly these things develop. And it's these large brands, I think, that actually help such startups develop because they provide them with the opportunity to scale. And once they scale, their prices can become competitive. So then they can start, you know, attracting younger brands to use them.
That's quite interesting, actually. I've also heard that Diesel is finding a new technology as well. I'm not sure about what kind of technology, but it's also kind of like so people can use their jeans and the way they manufacture. I'm not good at that whatsoever.
Yeah, but actually, yeah, there's a few technologies in denim because denim is very wasteful for so many different reasons. One of which is that when you cut denim, there's a lot of like leftover garments, and you don't know what to do with the cuts. I don't know what you call it, but you know, when you cut denim in pieces, and you just use a part of the fabric, and the rest of the fabric you have to dispose of. So there's a lot of technologies now where you can basically take fabric scraps or dead stock inventory, and you can put it through this machine, and it upcycles it and gives you sort of the yarn. So for example, you take all of the denim waste, put it through the machine, and then the result of it is going to be like a polyester yarn and a cotton yarn, and you can use these yarns again and make new garments out of them. So these things are still sort of in R&D phases, I would say, but they are becoming more and more realistic to use.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Since we already like touched down on sustainability is such a hot topic right now when it comes to everything, because people are more aware of the damages that we're doing to the environment, waste, the impact of everything that we consume. What do you think are the trends and drivers of innovation and sustainable business models are in the fashion industry?
I think, to be honest, yes, it's a very hot topic, sustainability, and you know, we're hearing it a lot and finding ways now on how that will be realistically implemented with fashion houses. But in reality, it's really not that easy. And it's very, very costly as well. So it is very, I believe, important to consider sustainability, but there are also a lot of ways where I believe brands can start to be sustainable. And one of them is not overproducing. We have an issue now of waste, and this waste is happening, of course, from inventory that is literally, you know, of old stockists that is not, is either old collections, buyers return it back that hasn't been sold. And one way is to really limit production but even that is already not a very easy step for a brand to take, because you are basically limiting your production, you are limiting your sales as well, not to hit the risk of keeping a lot of inventory and stockists that you don't know what to do with it. I'm sure we have read articles of brands and how they deal with stock, how they deal with inventory, which is really bad for the environment, and it's really not an example to really take within your brand. But basically these are ways. Another way is through packaging. We see brands that overly use very expensive packaging, and that is also as well paper waste. And these are ways into take into consideration in terms of as well recycle the inventory that you have and reuse that fabric into doing something else. So those are still ideas and implementations that brands will start taking, but they're still very new. And as well as another way is to reduce the number of collections that are going to be basically launched. So instead of 4 collections, a lot of brands now are taking 2 collections, or some of them are not even going to be following the calendar anymore. And that is something that I have taken the decision of doing, especially during this pandemic, is that I won't be, the brand won't be following the calendar, and we will drop collections when we wish. Because definitely as well, the consumer behavior in every city is different. So there are some people that will be traveling during, let's say, Hajj break, for example, or Eid, but in other cities, that is not really a time of vacation. And they don't really need a new wardrobe, let's say, or it's not even a holiday. So we are now at that brand, we announced our decision that we will drop collections when we wish. And when we see we need to drop the collection up from the consumer behavior and to really reach out immediately to the demographic of our, where our customers are. And we have realized that way. We did a test last year and it really works. Customers, when they want something from our brand, they want it at the time where they want to order it. And they don't really look into waiting 6 months for the collection to be launched. And we realized nowadays, especially with our demographic being very, mostly 25 to 45, which is a very young demographic, when they want something, they want it now. That wait is no longer a wait that is tolerated, let's say. And this is really, in my opinion, in my experience, being a brand owner, for a brand that is operating in this time and that has launched in 2015 with all of these changes that are happening in technology and consumer behavior in the world of sustainability. That is really one of the most amazing things I believe that brands are going to be more aware of right now. And should be taking very seriously. And it's really something, I'm sure, inshallah, that will reshape and change the industry in a much better way. So that is where I'm coming from in that topic.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Arwa that obviously overproduction is a disaster. Overproduction and dead stock has been discussed so much lately. Like, I think 2 years ago, there was so much buzz about Burberry. I think they burned $37 million worth of stock, which is obviously a ridiculous amount, like literally being burnt and, dumped. Another thing that's crazy is that a lot of people, instead of burning clothes, what they can do with it, because what are they going to do with the clothes? It's going to cost them so much to recycle it. Perhaps they put it in landfills, and landfills are becoming really expensive to use. So in order for you to dump your clothes in a landfill, you again have to pay a lot of money. So then they end up doing things like burning them. I think H&M also was exposed for doing something like that. So I think the sustainability here comes in two forms in my mind. It comes in terms of recycling and obviously trying to use technology to recycle your garments, and in terms of avoiding overproduction. A lot of brands like, I guess, Supreme and even Gaia, they're doing things like very limited drops, so they kind of see the demand through a pre-order form based on that demand. But again, like Arwa said, that does reduce revenue. Like, needless to say, it does reduce revenue. If you see things are sold out all the time, it's very frustrating for the customer as well. So in my opinion, a really good way of sustainability is just a change in business model. So I see things like Rent the Runway, which is a rental platform, or consignment platforms as things that actually give clothes a second life without having that cachet of, oh, this is recycled garments. It's very granola cachet rather than looking at something from the perspective of, oh, you're renting a garment, so you're giving people the chance to wear it, even though they might not be able to afford it, or you're allowing people to buy clothes that someone doesn't want. So rental can happen in ways like Rent the Runway right now, or it can even happen in peer-to-peer ways where people can rent stuff out of someone's closet. Same thing with consignment. It can be peer-to-peer, or it can be through a platform like the Wheeler Wheel. So I think these changes in business models have already obviously started, but I think they're going to get a lot more popular, as as also encompass sustainability, but I guess in a different way.
I mean, when it comes to jewelry, we're sustainable in so many ways, because a lot of people would, if they buy our pieces, and let's say in 10 years time, they want to resell them, they can always sell them because it's gold. So somehow, it's a good thing for us. So basically, people would invest in jewelry, even if they didn't have enough money to pay whatever premium they wanted to pay. But it's something that they feel either safe in getting, or they're happy to keep for a longer time, or give it to their kids when they get older. So there's that kind of a longer life, if you want. But I have to say that lately we realized that we needed to make sure that our production is less, that we focus more even on customization, which we already do. But this way we can manage also our stock, not overproduce, because as you see, the economy across the world is like going into a global crisis. So I would say gold and sustainability kind of go hand in hand.
I'd also want to add to a point that I think is also very important for our viewers to also know, is that something very I would say that would really, one of the most amazing things really about fashion houses and how we produce our clothing is that it's really made with craftsmanship. At the end of the day, fashion as well is emotional craft, and it's when it's done really with, of course, high quality fabrics. You could have those pieces forever. I mean, I still wear my mother's vintage blazers and dresses when she was 25 years old, so, and she tells me whenever I wear it, I wore that dress, after I got engaged, after our engagement, and, I wore that dress when I was there. And what's beautiful as well about fashion is that you are also, working with craftsmanship, you're working with artisans, and you're supporting that community. So one of the most brilliant embroidery houses, or one of the most amazing fabric suppliers in the world, and they make these fabrics and materials in-house, whether Italy, Japan, France. That is also an industry that, as a consumer, you are not only purchasing a garment that is done in a fashion house, but it's also fabrics that take time in making, and it's artists that are creating it. So it's really a whole community that the whole fashion industry works together. And when you, as a consumer, you buy a piece that is not mass produced, a piece that is really done with creativity, with art, with time, in perfecting the garment that, inshallah, you wear, timeless piece. That is also a whole community that definitely needs our support, because those people, they're artists, making fabrics, creating garments, pattern makers, embroidery. That is all art, and art is really a community that I believe will not die. And even in the world of sustainability, that community, by us enriching it and shedding light on these fashion houses that are making pieces not produced really in a way that is, not handcrafted, let's say, or not in a high quality atelier, is really something, and really, a topic that has to be always highlighted for consumers also to know the difference when you buy a piece that is by a fashion house or a piece that is not, that will basically, even using fabrics that are poly made and can get ruined after just a couple of washes. So it's really also a topic that in sustainability, I believe also it's beautiful for consumers to really know, when buying an item and buying a piece, what are the other areas where it involves in, who are the other industries that are also being affected. And one of them is also fabric, and those amazing fabric makers that really create beautiful fabrics for us. And I really believe that's really something that we have to highlight in fashion, because it's really a humanitarian kind of work. You are also enriching those other industries.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, when it comes to investments, is there a change on how investors are investing in fashion right now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, okay. So basically, when you look at investment in fashion as a global trend, I think there's a few areas that are kind of the focus of VCs or investors in general. So for example, one of them, because of 5G, there's a huge increase in investment in augmented reality and live stream video shopping. So I think this is something that I expect to start appearing more and more in 2021. So for example, in China, this space of live stream video shopping already generates more than about $5 billion in revenue a year, which is obviously a really large indication of what is to come once 5G is more widely available in this part of the world. There's also a lot of investment currently going into the B2B space. For example, businesses that are helping brands improve their customer service, making it more intuitive and intelligent, whether that's through smarter AI bots or other methods that involve SaaS business models. So that's another huge segment. If you, like what Arlo was saying, like customers are becoming super demanding. They want their items received immediately, and they want perfect customer service. They want to be able to return it seamlessly. And in order for larger brands to do that, they really need to invest in their customer service. And there's a lot of businesses now that are trying to tackle that in a more intelligent, let's say, and streamlined way. I think also, as I was saying, investment will continue to be funneled into new business models that explore sustainability from a non-traditional way. So whether it's like I can rent out my clothes to Rauda, or someone will buy my clothes off of me and rent it out to other people, or I can recycle my clothes in a specific way. So I think all of these are going to become a lot more relevant in the future. Something actually that is really interesting, I don't really know that much about it, but I find it to be super exciting, is digital clothing. So a really big trend right now that's garnering a little bit of attention is like brands like LVMH, for example, are designing digital skins for characters in games like League of Legends, for example. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's a huge increase of gaming, especially since COVID. So I'm sure that retailers are going to start monetizing on this space. So maybe they're going to start selling digital clothes for people's characters, or they're going to start capturing consumers through integrated advertising on games. So I think that's obviously an area that can be very interesting, especially because gaming is growing ginormously in the MENA region specifically.
True.
Do you ladies have anything else to say on this point, or should we move to the next question?
Nothing for me. Heba covered that all.
Okay, let's talk inspiration and advice. What advice would you give young talent, especially women like yourselves, that want to enter this industry?
I mean, I'll start with that, being the eldest here. I would give them, well, first and foremost is they need to love what they do. They need to do it from the heart. And this is something I've always said and I've always believed in. Because if you don't do anything, whether it's design or any creative, you know, in the creative field or even in the financial, whatever it is, if you're not doing something that you love and doing it from the heart, you will probably not succeed, or at least you will be bored by the time, you know, in a year or two or three down the road. So for me, you need to find your identity. You need to love what you do. So when you wake up in the morning and you go to work, it's something that you're doing it out of love and nothing else. I think this is the key to success, and this is the key to a happier life, if I may put it this way.
Yeah, that's great advice.
That is.
Yeah. From my perspective, I guess I would say being persistent is super important. And in my personal life, this has really paid off. I think persistence will follow through and just constantly working hard. There's nothing really that can replace that. We're always kind of, I guess, in life looking for an easy win or like the easy way to like get rich or to be successful or to become a CEO. But I think that in the end of the day, the thing that actually works out the most is just keeping your head down and working super hard and being very diligent. Sometimes I notice that, you know, being the smartest person in the room is really out of your control or is very arbitrary. But if you're the most hardworking person in the room, or if you're the most prepared, it ends up paying off on the long run a lot more. And so that's kind of some advice I would give.
Absolutely.
What about you, Arwa? What do you have? What advice would you give young women that want to become fashion designers?
I would really say that it's very important to ask yourself why. Why are you doing this? Especially in a time where really there are so many and the competition is very high. So ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? Because what will keep your brand, whatever brand, whatever you enter in fashion or whatever your brand is, the story is what will keep you engaged with the people. And when you know why you started and why you're doing this, the story is what will keep your brand alive, because there's something real behind it. And that's what fashion is. That is what I would say, because, speaking from me being a fashion designer, I'll speak from my industry, is that fashion is storytelling. It is a very personal journey. It's a journey that your customers engage with and they feel a part of it. And, they're always looking into what's happening next, and they feel really a part of that, journey that the brand is on. So I'd really say, to ask yourself why, and to do it really because when it comes to art, I don't believe faking an emotion lasts very long, because it shows. It's a very emotional journey. It's a very emotional kind of work that you do. And your customers or the people that follow you, they feel that. They feel what are you talking, they feel, you know, the stories that you tell through your collections. And really there's a beautiful quote that I always remember, is that to make art, one must communicate with it with honesty. Because it's really an emotion that you feel immediately, and it is really an emotional craft, I would say.
Okay, so we're gonna thank you ladies for all your inputs. This has been very interesting. Just to save on time, we're just gonna move towards the questions that we had submitted. So Muhammad submitted a question. It says, regarding sustainability, from a manufacturing point of view, as it's estimated that around 12% of the raw material that goes into production is considered waste. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think I touched on that a little bit. Definitely there's a huge waste in garment manufacturing, definitely. I think that the best thing to do with that waste is obviously to upcycle it. There's a lot of companies right now working to upcycle fabric waste and turn it back into its original yarn. There's a lot of companies that are looking to take fabric waste and sew it together into new clothing. There's a lot of companies that are working on more intelligent manufacturing techniques that actually reduce waste when you are cutting the actual fabric. So I think a combination of all of that is going to start becoming much more accessible to designers and even young designers, so they can start obviously reducing this waste, because it is ultimately when you take fabric waste and you dump it in a landfill, it ends up like, if a lot of it is polyester based, it ends up becoming plastic, and that takes like maybe 100 years to compost. So that's a huge problem. I mean, it's as big of a problem as plastic waste, I think.
Okay. We have another question. It's about the importance of having a demand planner forecasting your product's quantity. For upcoming and smaller brands, they don't have that role in their structure. Nadine and Arwa, this is relevant to you. Do you have a merchandise planner or analyst?
For me, no, we don't have on our team anyone like that, but we work closely with our products and manufacturers. So we have if I can say, I have very tight look on my production and my items that are a little bit everywhere with our retailers. So we try as much as we can to manage all these pieces, so we don't produce and reproduce things that already are available in our stock. So we do have a very close like system in the office where it tells us where everything is, in which store, if we have it or not. So that's how we monitor our production and our pieces.
Yeah, I definitely, in my brand, I would follow to what Nadine said. That's exactly what we do as well. And of course, as well as most of the retailers, they do have that data for you. And especially with retailers that we work with every season and every year, that is one of the topics and one of the discussions we have, because they basically, most retailers, they need to do that for their stores, because they would even know already before purchasing an item from us. They know that from the data they have from their consumers, from, you know, why they come to that certain store. They know the items that would work and items that they're not even interested in, no matter how beautiful personally they think it is. But they just know that from, you know, from the behavior and from, you know, what their customers really expect and want from that certain retail store, there are some items that just don't work. So that is something that definitely most, I would say, retail stores have that sort of data, and they do share that with the brands that they buy from. So it works really hand in hand.
Yeah, I actually have a follow-on question for Arwa and Nadine about that. So what do you guys usually do when you, say for example, your collection or your season is over and you have a new collection coming up? what do you do with the stuff that hasn't sold from previous collections? Do you put it on sale, or do you send it to retailers that are more like outlets, or is that not something you explore?
That's what I do. So we keep having it in the clearance sale. We have clearance sale events. So like we do a pop-up for like 3 days, and as well as, to be honest, we started also recycling those fabrics and reusing them in other pieces, but that would be a label that mentioned that this is an item that is used from recycled fabric within previous collections. So it's also already a story to mention when you're selling that garment.
Sure.
Regarding our stock, let's say if I have something that I've done 3-4 years back, you might still find it in some stores and it might still sell. Yeah. But if there's something that I personally don't want to be in the stock at that point with the retailers, what we do is we take them back, we keep them in our stock, we keep them in our showroom, and when we have pop-ups, we would put them in the pop-up as an extra. So we don't produce anything new or different from I totally believe that these pieces always have somebody to buy them. Right. Sometimes I have pieces that are 5 years old, 6 years old, and I'm not talking about the basic stuff. I'm talking about certain designs that will sell 5 years down the road. And this is when I always say, to each piece, a person that will love it and will buy it and will have it. If not, what we do is we gather it, and at one point I return it to the workshop. Obviously, I lose manufacturing, when the hand making charges, I would lose that, but at least I can use the gold to make something different or new with it, to put it in a new collection. Or the only thing is sometimes what happens when we use diamonds, this is where it's a bit tricky, because a lot of these small diamonds that we used might unfortunately go to waste. And this is where I try not to recycle pieces with diamonds.
Okay, that's cool. That's very interesting.
So we're just gonna cut it here. We're gonna answer the rest of the questions offline. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. This was very educational.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So thank you so much for being here. Cherry, do you have anything else to add?
That's it. I just wanted to thank you, Rhoda, for a great moderation, and I'd like to thank our speakers as well. Thank you for your time and
thank
for
you so much.
It's really insightful, and we love the session.
Thank you for us. Have a good day.
Thank you.
See you, ladies, soon.
See you. Good to see you all.
So good to see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.